here's what I find often happening in deeper realization, in the sort of shadow space that comes after awakening, and sometimes even a few years after awakening. Sooner or later, life will really shake up your Etch-a-Sketch. You know the Etch-a-Sketch, it's like that little toy that you write on by turning the little knobs, and you turn it over and shake it to erase the picture. In case you don't know what that is, but life tends to sort of shake you up. And this often happens through very typical human situations, breakups, coming face to face with like repressed emotional material, challenges with work, challenges with health, all kinds of things happen. And so it's not uncommon. Life will just shake you up this way, shake up your whole system, your whole collection of expectations. Like I say, sometimes disruption is like your friend when it comes to realization, although disruption's never fun for the apparent individual, for the person. So I find this happens to people. It doesn't, I guess, always happen. There's no always, but it's pretty typical. At some point, you just find your Etch-a-Sketch shaked up. You find your shaken up. You find your life just kind of in sort of kind of upheaval. And it happens in all different ways. Sometimes it's like a series of situations that you just haven't addressed for a long time, and you have to address them, and can drag out quite a while. It can drag out for months or longer, where you're restructuring your life in the relative. Sometimes it happens over a short period of time where there's just these major disruptions for various reasons. And often what people describe is they feel like completely unguarded. And it's very interesting because often early in spirituality, when we start getting tastes of the undivided, we have a certain kind of naive confidence about it, which is great, and sometimes even with not sometimes, with an awakening, with an initial awakening, often there's a honeymoon period of a ton of clarity. Although we are seeing things very, very clearly, we're experiencing reality very clearly, we're not completely aware of how much conditioning remains and the power of it and the gravity of it and the effect it can have on us. So often there's this bit of a naive, peace that comes with that, where it's like, oh, nothing can touch me. There's nothing here to touch. There's nothing here to be affected by any, like there's a sort of peace that is, without fully realizing it, it's a bit of a manufactured piece because we may be somewhat avoidant in those spaces, or we really just haven't come crashing into the emotion body yet, into the deep shadow. But yeah, at some point, often significantly after that, like a significant amount of time after that, after those times of a sort of naive clarity, we come into this place of just being unguarded. I think Thich Nhat Hanh once explained it like, if you imagine all of your skin is removed and you're like everything under your skin is exposed. So it's exposed to the elements, it's exposed to like, insects, and if you're in the water, it's like exposed to everything that can feed off of you. And I can't remember the exact analogy he used, but he's describing this really well. And it can be rather like that, where it's like, you don't have this strong belief structure of inside and outside anymore. You can't just quote unquote, protect yourself, actually from your own repressed material through mind identification anymore, which is what we've been doing for a long time. We're just using thoughts to avoid emotion, essentially. We can't do it anymore. It's like we don't have that division so intact, right? So yeah, the idea of non-duality sounds great. The idea of non-division, non-separation sounds great until this part. When this part comes, it doesn't sound so great anymore. It feels like so visceral, so raw, so inescapable. And, again, this is just something people often go through. And at the same time, this is really good. It's like, it's really rough on the person. It's really rough on the individual. It's really rough on the one that really thought those initial penetrations of the absolute were there to make it feel better. It's just what happens, right? It's really hard on that one, where it's like, oh God, this isn't about me feeling better anymore. It's just not about that. It's about seeing reality clearly, is what it is. It's about feeling clearly. It's about experiencing reality without the illusions of time and the illusions of division and separation and control. And that's really uncomfortable to any remaining sense of identity. It's just uncomfortable. But it's really good from the standpoint of realization, because it's like handing over the baton in a way from the seeming individual spiritual seeker to the process that's just completely on its own program. It's just not about you, what you want, how you feel about how this is going, how you perceive reality. Like none of that is taken into consideration. It's just truth. Reality just appears as it is. And again, it's a wonderful time for the that which we're sort of dying into, or that which is sort of coming awake to itself, to personify something that's not personifiable. But it's tragic to the individual, and it can be very difficult, even just adjusting behaviorally and through thought and emotion and the way we interact with our own self. That's very challenging. Can be rather challenging. So, why do I say these things? Just so you're not, taken by too much surprise, or you're not completely disillusioned that the whole process has just gone off the rails and you've failed and you've screwed it up. And to some degree you did fail. And to some degree, you know that your own efforts to control this process just aren't going anywhere. It doesn't work that way. And you knew this before to some degree, but this becomes more and more full on. So yeah, it's very difficult to let go of that. But what you're really doing is letting go of control. And what you're really, really doing is letting go of the illusion of control. There's nothing there to actually let go of. And there's no one to do the letting go, really. It's just noticing that there's nothing that could ever hold on. Nothing that sort of stays, nothing that accumulates, nothing that, and the other side of that is there's nothing you need, actually. There's nothing that needs fixed or repaired or to find. You don't need to find anything. You don't need to rid yourself of anything. It's nothing like that. That's good, right? That's the good news. The bad news is, and you have nothing to do. You can't control this anymore. You never could. You're not in control of anything. The sense of the one being apart from everything is just sort of fizzling out. It has nowhere to stand anymore. It has no place to anchor itself. And when it has no place to anchor itself, nowhere to stand, etc., it's just a matter of time before you can't really find it anymore. It's just not there. And that last process, as we approach the let's call it the no self realization, or let's call it anatta, as you approach that, it can be very, very difficult. Because there's something in us that just keeps wanting to do something, to want to control, or to not want to really see the crux of what's actually been happening this whole time. At the same time, it's a totally natural process. It's fine, So there can be some wavering there between like sort of abject horror at the whole situation, or just that's putting it dramatically, but there can be a very strong sense of like wanting to grab on and not finding anywhere to grab on anymore. And at the same time, there are moments, or maybe alternating, there are moments of this just deep, deep peace, clarity, flow, and so forth. So it does tend to fluctuate back and forth. And it's okay. It's okay. This happens. Again, you won't be able to tell yourself it's okay, and that makes you feel okay necessarily. There's going to be something about this that doesn't feel okay, because this whole time you've been trying to make yourself feel okay with the illusion of control. It's just never worked. But because there was enough mind identification going on, it seemed like it worked at times. Now you don't have that anymore. You can't fool yourself. So yeah, it seems like there's a lot to let go of, but again, it's just an illusion dispelling itself ultimately. And so it's okay. It's totally okay. Does it mean there's nothing you should do in the relative during this time? No, that would be a misperception of what I'm saying. It doesn't mean you should not take care of your responsibilities. It doesn't mean you shouldn't still try to communicate as effectively, honestly, and authentically with people as you can, because there's still a relative world, right? Don't take this to mean like you can just sort of avoid all relative interactions and that's going to make this process easier. It might in a certain way, but you'll pay the price for that later. So, don't try to make major adjustments in your life at this time. Usually, if the major adjustments are going to come, they just often come on their own. And just, take care of your responsibilities in a sense, the responsibility of being present, of showing up for what's happening now, acknowledging it, feeling into it, noticing that, you don't have any specific control. That sense, again, this is not at the practical level we're talking, this is the identity level. So, and this is a common mistake I think some people make when they really drop into no self for the first time. It's like, oh, there's no control over anything. So that means there's nothing to do. and there's nothing you can do, and that's wrong. That's actually a total misunderstanding, and it's a misperception between relative and absolute, right? And this isn't new. Like there's very, very good doctrine by deeply realized people in history that talk about this very clearly. Dogen, for instance, Tozan, for instance. So yeah, there's still, in a practical sense, you don't have to struggle with yourself about, well, who's going to do that if I'm going to do some emotional work or something? It doesn't matter. The answer should be pretty clear by now that it's not really about who, because there's no who for it to be about, and you can feel that viscerally. So the visceral process that's happening is not in your control, and so you don't have to pretend that there's no one there in a way that it seems like there is, right? I think Ramesh Balsekar said, I saw a quote from him once that said, when you see clearly or realize non-doership, then you can just go ahead and act as if there's a doer, because there's no contradiction there. And I think that's really true. Like, that's definitely my experience, is like, there is no sense of separate self. There is no separate self, and there never has been, not for anyone. It just doesn't exist. Selves are an illusion, essentially, of the mind. They're sort of daydreams, right? And that's exquisitely clear. It's not something you can lose sight of. It's not forgettable, so to speak. But that doesn't mean that you walk around telling yourself there's nothing to do, that no one can do anything, that there's no cause and effect. That's a mistake, right? It would be like saying, well, I don't have to put gas in my car. I can just drive it and it'll just keep going though I didn't put gas in it, because there's no cause and effect. There is a cause and effect. So again, there's a conflation, I think, that happens with the doctrine of no self and then other doctrines that are not really clear doctrines about non-doership, right? So yeah, it's okay to do emotion work as this is all playing out. It's okay to, do relational work if it's helping therapy, if it's helping practices, meditation, calming the mind, calming the body. This is all helpful, of course. It's just that doesn't cause reality to be what reality is, because reality is how it is. The doer doesn't cause reality because there's no doer. And yet doing does happen, right? It seems like a contradiction, but in deeper realization, contradictions are fine. Not only are they fine, they're actually more clear statements of reality than the typical statements we make. So yeah, but the underlying message here is it can be rather difficult, of course, at times. And just trust that even though there's a part of you that feels like it's dying in the process, trying to grab on, trying to grasp, trying to control, it's okay. It's a natural process. That one doesn't exist in the first place. It's not like it's going to, stop this process from happening. It's not causing the process to happen. It's just sort of independent of it in a way. And it doesn't mean anything's gone wrong or gone off the rails or that you failed. It's just how this goes.